then we'll go ahead and get started. So hello, everybody. Thanks for being with us today. We're so excited to have you all with us. My name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Community Programs at the Venture Center. And while we host a ton of programs throughout the year, this one is specifically important. This is a new program that we've launched this year called VCHealth, primarily focused on entrepreneurship and mental health. And then we take a deep dive into specific topics around that. So this one will be about the mental health aspect, entrepreneurs, as well as spouses and partners and that relationship and dynamic. So I wanted to share that with everyone. Obviously want to thank our two presenters or speakers today, Bruce Trimble and Ken Clark. They also happen to be our presenting sponsors, the Bridgeway and Chenal Family Therapy. So thank you both for being involved. And also our corporate sponsors who support all of our community programs, Frost Accounting Firm, Wright Lindsay Jennings, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, and Simmons Bank. Wanted to remind everybody of a few events that we have coming up. On March 30th, we have a virtual woman run, which focuses in on leadership and women here in the state of Arkansas. So that's going to be a chat with Esperanza Masana Crane. She works with the AEDC now, and her sister, Sarah Hurst, who's with First Iran and also is an entrepreneur owning her own business. So that'll be March 30th from noon to 1. If you're interested in participating, all you got to do is register for that. You can do that on our website if you're subscribed to our newsletter, or on Facebook. We share it at all those locations. Also on April 9th, we've got tools for solo entrepreneurs. And that'll be a good one with our team, our marketing team. So Mimi San Pedro, Becky Pittman, and Molly, they will be here to talk about tools that they've used and those that support solo entrepreneurs. So noon to 1, April 9th. And also April 13th, we have a lunch and learn with the Reskill Arkansas team to share some news with that, noon to 1. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Bruce and Ken to dive in today's topic of entrepreneurship, mental health, and spouses/partners.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Ashley, do you have my screen?
Are you needing to share?
Yeah. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, there may be a little lag, but go ahead and put it in presentation mode. All right.
Okay. Well, once again, it's great to see so many people interested in mental health. As we get started, I want you to know that April McSpadden, a licensed clinician, is available from 12 to 1:30 p.m. today to assist those who may be affected by these topics. And she may be reached at 501-733-9789. There is no charge for this initial consultation, and it is confidential. After those hours, you may call the Chenal Family Therapy, the Bridgeway, or another provider. When we last met, I shared some facts about how COVID-19 impacted America's mental health. In a survey conducted by Universal Health Services, the parent company of the Bridgeway, 62% of American adults reported increased stress, anxiety, or depression. One of the issues that we detected with the pandemic's onset is that not all relationships survived lockdown. In the face of COVID-19, the frustrations couples usually express in counseling sessions, such as financial worries, division of chores, intimacy or lack thereof, and conflicting views on child rearing, were taking a severe turn. For sensitive people or those with a mental illness, spousal lockdown was painful as routines were disrupted and irritations festered over how one or the other partner eats, breathes, sleeps, and generally just goes about their business. And starting or managing a business only compounded the problem. Here are 11 signs that you can detect if your significant other may be having a mental health issue. They seem to get mad easily. While everyone's entitled to the occasional bad mood, it's never a good sign if your partner has been blowing up in fits of rage. A sign of depression is that everything and everyone easily annoys them, like traffic. So if your partner is suddenly road raging, take note. They've been feeling tired lately. Long work days aside, you should check in with your partner if they're suddenly going to bed super early. The same goes for the partner who never goes to bed. Emerging mental health concerns will often drive people to desire a lot more sleep or the opposite, and they can't stay in bed. Either way, change in sleep patterns could be a sign of a problem. He or she is suddenly spacey or forgetful. If your partner's been out of it lately, it could be due to their unaddressed or ignored inner turmoil. What seems like a sudden onset of forgetfulness can be a sign of struggling with stable mental health. Someone who once was very organized may find themselves missing deadlines, forgetting to pick up the kids on time, and seeing other duties becoming messy and disorganized. They seem to be drinking more. While it might be okay to have the occasional drink, take care of a partner who seems to be turning to alcohol or other coping mechanisms on a regular basis. Many people with mental health issues have learned various ways to cope with their symptoms. Individuals with anxiety or depression, for example, realize that something is off but choose to medicate their symptoms rather than address them. They aren't interested in physical intimacy. Since issues like depression and anxiety can steal one's energy and ruin their self-esteem, don't be surprised if an ailing partner doesn't want to be physically intimate. This may be one of the many signs your partner isn't feeling quite like themselves. They're complaining about not feeling well. Mental health issues often take a physical toll, so pay attention to a partner who can't seem to stop complaining. Believe in the mind-body connection. When something is depressing someone and they won't admit that they are depressed or stressed, eventually their bodies start giving out. They may complain about headaches, stomach aches, or a constant feeling of fatigue. They don't want to shower or do the laundry. Everyone's needs are different, so it's okay if your partner doesn't shower every day or if they go a week without washing their hair. Do take note, however, if their life is suddenly all sorts of dirty. People with depression can sometimes neglect self-care, not showering or brushing teeth, wearing the same clothes several days in a row. They may also forget to do laundry or stop cleaning their apartment. They won't answer the phone. Someone who's struggling with a mental health issue like depression may not have the energy to make plans to hang out, much less answer the phone. If this is your partner, then they may also start to isolate themselves, and that's not healthy. You can't predict their moods. Again, it's normal to have some mood swings throughout the day, but it's not so typical if you can't predict your partner's moods or if they're generally extreme. Mood swings between high and low that cannot be accounted for by life getting better or worse may indicate bipolar disorder. This one can genuinely impact your relationship, so the sooner you can both seek help, the better. They don't seem present. When hanging out with your partner, do they feel like they're fully present? If not, they could be in their head overthinking a problem, which is common when struggling with mental health issues. They may be ruminating or be hyper-focused on an issue that is out of their control. Soon they will not be able to be present with you and may not be able to focus on conversation or activity. Finally, they don't want to talk about the future. If your partner is dealing with depression, they may not gather the energy to think about the future. So if that seems to be the case, take it upon yourself to check in with them. Ask your partner about their goals. If they don't have any or don't seem to care about their future, this may be a sign of mental health issues such as anxiety or depression. If you notice any of these signs, gently point them out to your partner and find ways to be as supportive as possible. And remember, helping yourself goes a long way. Make sure you take care of yourself through healthy coping mechanisms. Recognizing the impact on your relationship is important, but it's just the first step to finding the strategies that will help your relationship become a strong, safe place. Once again, thank you for your time today. It's my pleasure to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Ken Clark.
Hello, everybody. Can we hear me okay? See me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ken Clark. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I am also the founder of Chenal Family Therapy, or co-founder. My wife deserves probably as much credit, of Chenal Family Therapy. We are a 3-time Inc. 5000 business. We'll be a 4th-time business this year. We've grown from $0 in revenue to over 10 million for 2021. So I get to speak to this topic as somebody who both cares for and understands high conflict couples and entrepreneurs in the mental health space, but I've also walked the journey. There's a lot of folks out there that attempt to give this advice, but haven't lived it. To that point, at ground zero of my own mental health journey has been how my marriage has intersected with the growth of our business. And I would advocate for both spouses and entrepreneurs right now that it is a incredibly complex, maybe one of the hardest things to do ever, journeys to mix a marriage, which is hard enough to begin with, right? Half of them fail, and a business, a launch, of which 7 out of every 10 fail. You have two exercises that by themselves are some of the hardest things ever to do, and you're doing them simultaneously. And I know for my wife, one of the running jokes is that I'm married to the business and that she's the other woman. My children feel like our favorite child is Chenal Family Therapy. That this business, which has been an obsession for me, it's been a place where I've worked out a lot of my issues, is not without consequence for my family. And yet it's still my journey, right? It's still something that Ken does. In fact, they would love it if I would just quit, go get a W-2 and work for Bruce or something like that. So I want to make the case that this is inordinately complex, that it is both an individual and a combined struggle. And it has to be recognized on all those levels. That an entrepreneur at their core should not be guilted into simply being more attentive to their family, and a spouse should not be guilted or pressured into giving more grace to the entrepreneur. In part because couples exist as a system. And this is one of the big things I want you to hear today, is that it's not just a individual mental health journey for two people, but those two persons' individual mental health is fed or starved by the system that they exist in, right? It's a symbiosis, it's a circle. You scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing, or vice versa. How Ken is doing affects the marriage, and how the marriage is going affects Michelle, and then how Michelle's doing affects the marriage, which affects how focused Ken is at work, and it feeds off one another. So while it's important to care for the individuals, it's also super important to recognize and care for the system, just like we would care for the culture of a company that has different departments but still has to operate and deliver results together. So to that end, I want to give you a few simple concepts and admonitions and some things to try out. Number one, as a spouse, you are going to have a front row seat and a voice in the entrepreneur's journey that kind of like Bruce was talking about is unparalleled. Their mentors, their coaches, their accountants, their employees, nobody else is probably going to hear them sobbing silently in the shower on the really bad day, right? Or see that we've gone from one bourbon a night to 2 doubles a night in the course of 6 months, right? And so that front row seat comes with some deep responsibility that you may not want, you may not ask for, but because it's a system, because the impact of that individual's choices affects you, it's your responsibility to self to speak up. And I really want to encourage you on that front, that your responsibility to self is as important as your responsibility to your spouse. That if they go sideways, if they become unhealthy, if they have a tragic event that occurs, it impacts you just as much as them. Maybe even more so, because you're left trying to figure out what to do with this business that you weren't a fan of anyway. So with that in mind, we want to encourage you, as always, to ask for help early and often. That as an individual, a partner of an entrepreneur, you have a right and obligation to self to seek out regular counsel, right? Whether that's a mentor or a pastor or a licensed mental health professional. You may need couples counseling, but every couple, the individuals in the couple need counseling as well. So before you know what to do, before you know what the right answer is, before you figure out whether or not you should speak up, go find yourself a counselor. Go find yourself somebody who's safe to talk to, who you can bounce your wild ideas off of, your fears, whether they're rational or irrational. That's crucial. Don't operate without your own advice. Two, I want to give you like the nugget of what both my wife and I do in therapy with couples. We're both couples therapists. The vast majority of people married the right person. Just like the vast majority of businesses are a great idea, actually, but somewhere between the idea and the execution over time, it goes sideways. And a lot of those sideways moments are avoidable, but it's because the mental game is not on point. For couples, and especially couples that intersect with the entrepreneurial journey, you need to understand that there is a ricochet effect between fear in both parties. That when I, as a therapist, look at why otherwise healthy humans go sideways, it's almost always because fear has grown out of control, run unchecked, and is not getting any help in them. When Ken is afraid that his wife is not paying enough attention to him, Ken might apply pressure to his wife. Why don't you ever pay attention to me? Or you should be appreciative. I work all day, and can't you hang out with me when I come home? Right? That may feed my wife's fear, however, that I don't understand where she's coming from, or she can do everything else right. And if she's not ready to hang out with me on a dime, that her efforts don't matter, which then causes her to react a certain way, which makes me feel rejected, which makes me then lean on her harder, right? We get these interlocking cycles of fear and an attempt to be unafraid that play out. In every entrepreneurial couple that I see, there is a large amount of unaddressed fear that is feeding off one another. And in this great ironic moment, people's attempt to solve the problem becomes problematic. Their attempt to get the other person to pay attention is done in a way that scares and triggers the other person, causes a bad outcome, and then it boomerangs back on them. So more than anything else, if you're looking for a place to unite and begin talking as a couple, even without a therapist's help, if you're looking for a place to make a stand and clasp hands and say, we've got to get control of our marriage and how this business intersects with our marriage, it starts first and foremost with saying, I'm afraid, and asking somebody to help take care of you, asking them to help you be less afraid. But be prepared for them to say, I'm afraid too, right? At our best, we're kind of stuck in our fears together. So that's at ground zero of this. I want to encourage you that this whole journey, even reaching out and asking for help, calling, somebody, over at the Bridgeway or at Chenal Family Therapy, or going to your pastor or whatever. Those are scary moments because we have to admit that things are not as they seem, perhaps, to the outside world. So realize that we live in these systems of fear and interpretation and their loops. So here's some big recommendations that I have for you. Number one, if you're the spouse of an entrepreneur, you need to recognize that there is something there that drives them that probably has nothing to do with you. Like Walter White in Breaking Bad, who tries to convince himself that I did all this for my family, right? Only to, at the end, in one of the great scenes in the whole thing, says, I did this for me, right? That most entrepreneurs, we say, oh, I'm doing this so my family can have a better life, or so that we can have a secure future. The reality is I was the kid who was too pudgy in middle school and didn't have enough friends, and wasn't good at sports. And I finally found my thing. And I'll be damned if somebody's going to get me to walk away from it. This is the thing I've been best at. And so there's a personal obsession there that drives me. And it doesn't matter who I would have gotten married to. It doesn't matter what my wife does. That obsession exists separate from her and from my kids. And so for both the spouse and the entrepreneur to recognize and acknowledge that entrepreneurs are driven by something deep inside them, right? A deep need to make a mark, or disprove some voices, or finally look in the mirror and be proud of who they are. And that has nothing to do with our spouse. That is a liberating thing, right? That removes the false belief that somehow the marriage is not enough, or that the family is not enough, or that they could do something to help soothe the entrepreneur. Likewise, the entrepreneur needs to realize how unfair that journey is to spouses, right? They didn't sign up for this. They had no idea that you were this crazy on the inside. this possessed with this idea of making your mark or seeing your name in lights or building the better mousetrap. And that what we put our families through as entrepreneurs is a debt we'll never be able to fully repay. That because they love us, they're patient with us while we work the late nights, while we secretly look at our phone while we're supposed to be watching a family movie, or have one too many bourbons at family night because I can't deal with employee stuff from today. I can't turn it off, right? And entrepreneurs who liberate their spouses from having to appreciate how hard they work, and instead see them as people who I'm deeply thankful for that you put up with me on this journey, right? That's a very important thing for us to do for our spouses. With all that in mind, I've got two big tips on communication, if you will, around entrepreneurs, their spouses, and the business. On a side note, right, this is one of my favorite little spiels to give when anybody walks in my office. Most couples walk in my office and I say, hey, so why are you all here? Tell me why you're coming in. And I kid you not, like 8 or 9 out of 10 times, they will say, well, we have communication problems. And as we get into it, I'll educate them on communication theory as it becomes apparent to me that they really don't have a communication problem, right? In communication theory, there's really only 4 parts: sender, receiver, channel, and message, right? And in the same way that somebody flips me off on the freeway when I cut them off, right, and I don't like it, that's not a communication problem. The communication's very, very clear. They don't like me and they think I'm a horrible driver. And when couples say that they have communication problems about how much somebody's working or how little they appreciate it, they don't really have a communication problem. The message is super clear: back off, or be home earlier, or I'm not happy with the way you're doing things. That's not a communication problem. What that is a collaboration problem. That two people are struggling to together solve a problem that both impacts them. Because they believe it's a communication problem, and this is such a simple thing that I'm explaining to you, if you just listen, you'll get it, and then leave me alone or whatever, right? They attempt to communicate their ways through it, but what they really need is better collaboration. As part of that, the one thing they can do to improve their communication is be very choosy about when they do it. For most of us that are entrepreneurs, and so I'm speaking to the spouses here, I know my wife has walked on eggshells for a decade of trying to figure out when to bring up the fact that our kids need braces with the guy who's trying to figure out how to pay rent on the office, right? Of course, the natural tendency is he looks really happy right now. Maybe it's a good time to tell him, right, that we've got to buy braces. And of course, that's the one moment where I'm like, oh, finally, I'm not thinking about the business. I'm just watching Parks and Rec. And then my wife's like, hey, by the way, $1,500 for braces or whatever, whatever it is. We got to be careful when we choose to communicate with one another. Likewise, for me as an entrepreneur, if the things that my wife hears out of me during every quality time moment is business related, if that's the only thing that I know how to connect over, we sit and have a glass of wine on the patio, and she's like, how are you? And I'm like, well, here's this really cool thing that we're going to do at work, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to do, and by the way, she's trying to not think about all those things because she doesn't have control over them. She doesn't really want to be on this journey some days. That's a trigger for her. So my 2 big recommendations are that, number 1, you would have business-free discussion connection zones. That you would have some time during the week where you are not allowed to talk about any of the maintenance details of life. You're not allowed to talk about what's going on in the business, or should we refinance the house, or what are we going to do about little Johnny and him throwing rocks at cars or whatever. Like you literally just have to sit down and talk about the Razorbacks or nothing or the grass growing. But every couple needs protected time anyway. That's especially true if you're an entrepreneur. Second, we also need dedicated time where the spouse in particular knows they get to talk about the business and get to talk about the impact on them, right? That's the flip side of the coin. If my wife knows that, every Sunday morning we sit down and process life and the business, then she'll save some of her commentary for then. And by the way, there's a lot of things where if she waits 2 or 3 days, it resolves itself. It's not that big of a deal. It's not worth it. So we need to protect some time where the partner as well can talk about their frustrations, their fears, their hopes, their reservations, their whatever. Now, that may be where therapy fits in. If you can't manage that on your own, therapists are always happy to help facilitate those conversations. So how does a couple actually bring around change and collaboration? And this is the last big tip I'll leave you with, is I am a huge fan of what I call passing the memo. I think, and this is true whether you're an entrepreneur or anything else in between, any couple that does this will have a better relationship. If you have a once a week or a once a month time where you literally sit down and pass the memo, here's what I liked this last month, and here's what I didn't like, and the other person is not allowed to respond, and the person with the complaint passing the memo is not allowed to explain past the surface level, past one sentence, it is amazing how much stuff will actually get changed, right? So much stuff does not get addressed because we attempt to respond in the moment instead of just hearing. If my wife says, I'm just frustrated, I don't get enough time with you, end of story, you're not allowed to respond, I'm not allowed to explain any further. And I don't have to defend myself, and she doesn't have to defend why she feels that way. Guess what? I'm probably more apt to just go ahead and change it. Next time I have a choice, I'll probably just choose her more. But the moment that I have to defend why I pour time into the business, or that she has to defend why she needs more time from me, right? We get distracted into these kind of like moral arguments of is it okay that you do this? Are you making good choices, bad choices? Are you a good spouse? Are you not? And the moment we begin defending ourselves, we lose the capacity to help another human. People only have enough bandwidth. This is true of employees as well. People only have enough bandwidth to do one of two things: help you or defend themselves. And the moment we go into defense mode, we're done helping. So this exercise of pass the memo, where a couple just says, here's what I like this month, here's what I didn't like, here's what I would like to change, do with it what you will, accomplishes far more than all these recurring fights and arguments about, oh, you're working late again, et cetera. All right. So that's my big takeaway tip. If you're in an entrepreneurial marriage and you're not getting what you need, the best thing you can do is start with 10 minutes once a month and pass the memo, no response allowed. I guarantee you will see change out of that. Couple resources I would like to recommend to you. Number one, there is a lot of great podcasts and things out there for couples that own businesses together, entrepreneurial couples. A quick trip to Google and type in business, podcast, couples. You will find so much stuff that is other people talking about their journey as an entrepreneurial couple, which for me has always brought a lot of peace, hearing other people who've actually walked through this be able to give me good advice. Couple of books I would recommend. I highly recommend Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. She is the founder and one of the main drivers of a therapy modality called emotionally focused couples therapy, which is spectacular. It's really good at getting down to those fears and hurts and things that we need paid attention to and not getting stuck on the top level details. I would also recommend a book called The Passionate Marriage by a guy named David Schnarch. It's not for people under 18, probably. Let me put it that way. No fun pictures or anything, but it's a great book about intimacy within couples. And more importantly, how intimacy, sexuality is kind of a microcosm for how couples treat each other outside the bedroom, how we learn to differentiate and have things be okay for our partner that aren't okay for us, and they do the same, and not turn those things into interpretations. Just allow them to be struggles. Sometimes our struggles are just struggles. They don't need to be interpreted any further. Sometimes I'm just the driver that my wife would not have me be. I drive too fast and tailgate too close. And that's just the way I am. And no amount of arguing is going to change that. And it just sucks to have to ride in the car with me. But it doesn't mean that I don't love her, that I can't slow down. And so that same thing is true with entrepreneurs and spouses of entrepreneurs. So I would highly recommend that book as well. So again, if you are in a marriage and struggling, guess what? You're statistically normal. If you are a business owner and struggling with running a business, congratulations, you're statistically normal. If you are a business owner who is married and feel like you're drowning, congratulations, you're especially statistically normal. This is why the Venture Center is here, why people like Bruce and I are here, is we want to support you in that journey. We have walked that journey. You are not alone. Reach out and ask for help. With that, I'll turn it back over to Ashley, and we will open it up to questions and comments and other contributions.
Yes, thank you both so much. I know there were probably several heads nodding. We can't see our attendees, but lots of heads were probably nodding on the other side. So thank you for bringing light to this topic and speaking to some resources and things. Someone did ask if you can in the chat, post the recommended readings if you get a chance, Ken. And for those that may have tuned in a little bit later, we want to remind everyone, this is not on Facebook Live. This is only recorded internally for those that registered. So we'll make sure before we open it up for questions, I'm actually going to stop the recording, and that way you can ask your questions to Bruce and Ken and they can respond. So I want to remind everyone, if you're not familiar with the webinar format, if you click chat, you'll notice a little blue panel in the to portion that says panelists or panelists and attendees. If you want them to respond to your question, just the panelists, you can click panelists and ask your question. If you'd like it to be posed to everyone, you can select panelists and attendees. Hopefully that's not uber confusing. We just want to make sure if you want some anonymity, you can send your questions directly to the panelists. So we're going to open that up. If you have a question, go ahead and do that. Or you can raise your hand and I can select you and you can ask your question aloud. So several options. I will go ahead and stop the recording though.
All right.